All right, now students, whenever you hear about the tropical savanna grasslands, you have this distinctive view of the sun rising over the Serengeti plains of Africa and whatnot, right? So these things actually kind of resonate to our minds, right? Okay, but generally speaking, these particular areas are technically found in specific regions of the world, primarily between 5 and 15 degrees north of the equator, as well as 5 and 15 degrees, 5 to 15 degrees south of the equator. All right, so that's going to recap that. These regions exist between 5 to 15 degrees north and 5 to 15 degrees south of the equator, and this basically will encompass large continental land masses throughout the entirety of the Earth. All right. Um, Tropical grasslands vary distinctively from tropical rainforests. As we can see, listen to the term grasslands. Unlike rainforest, tropical grasslands basically are encompassed by very few trees. All right. In terms of if I were to quote one of the particular statements from your multiple choice test papers, all right, it is said to be encompassed by grasses, all right, interspersed by few trees. Now, class, if you look at this in comparison to the rainforest video, you can see that there are, in fact, no major distinctive layers. There is essentially like a monotonous layer of grasses with relatively few trees scattered here and there. All right, but we should bear in mind that these particular areas experience a very, very distinctive wet and a very, very distinctive dry season. All right, because they are found in areas which possess tropical continental climates. All right, so tropical savanna grasslands exist in areas which experience tropical continental climates, and we know there is a very distinctive wet and dry season associated with that. All right, now the grasses which actually grew in such areas, they basically grew at an estimated height of approximately 3 meters, which is essentially approximately 10 feet. All right, and as you can see from this little image on your screen, this is like a show you how grass basically grew. Now, students, these grasses grew in what you call huge clumps called tussocks. All right, and these clumps are very, very unique because they basically have very distinctive, relatively deep root systems, all right, which can actually acquire moisture primarily during the wet season, sorry, primarily during the dry season. Now, students, bear in mind something, grasses do not require a lot of energy to grow. It does not require a lot of nutrients to grow. It does not. As a matter of fact, grasses can grow in areas of relatively poor soils. All right, grasses can grow in area which is very perhaps in some instances drought stricken. Grasses can actually grow in areas with minimal nutrients and minimal moisture and very blistering heat. All right, and we know for sure the tropical continental regions experience tropical continental climates and they experience extremities when it comes to certain temperature differences and whatnot. Okay, so these clumps are known as tussocks, like I mentioned earlier. All right. Now, this grass on the screen might essentially show you a view of a green bunch of grass, but bear in mind also, during the dry season, especially if there is a very distinctive dry season, all right, um, and if the dry season in fact relatively short, these particular grasses can essentially become brown. That doesn't mean they are dead, right? But however, they are reactivated upon the first sign of rainfall, which is primarily marking the start of the wet season. So there's a very wet and dry, distinctive wet and dry season associated, but guess what? Grasses can tolerate most of them. All right. Students, I hope you can actually see the image on the screen properly. As you can see, this is in fact a diagram. Now it looks like a kind of radish, but this is my little basic diagram showing the grasses which here grow in the huge clumps known as tussocks. In the surface of the earth, right? The area is said to be very parched, very dry, in the heart of the dry season. But these grasses are very well adapted with root systems which simply scatter or branch along the surface of the earth. And this is in fact a carpeting mechanism where the roots help to maintain moisture and also help to also maintain a certain degree of nutrient from being blown away by the winds. All right, and this is in fact an adaptation to conserve moisture and nutrients. So grasses are very, very unique when it comes to that. We also mentioned the clumps, and we also mentioned deep root systems, which dig deep into the ground, all right, in an attempt to find moisture primarily during the dry season. Bear in mind also, class, grasses take a very long period. They actually can adapt to very harsh conditions. All right. Now, the very few trees which actually grew, all right, in these regions, they have a very broad crown. Look at this huge broad crown, which basically encompasses a very large section. It provides shade to the low-lying region. All right. Apart from providing shade, it is very unique in terms of providing a relatively cooler microclimate, especially under the blistering heat during the daytime. So a lot of animals and whatnot tend to linger and settle right at the base of these trees to ensure that they have that protection against the blistering heat from the sun. This image here also shows you a specific tree, all right, which look at the distinctive crown in this particular tree. All right, this is actually very, very unique. And plenty animals, for example, you'll see some jaguars and whatnot lingering even on the branches, and lions and whatnot will be lingering at the bottom of the particular area. Now that is in Africa, of course. All right. Okay. Now a very unique tree, which is in fact adapted to this particular region, is what you call the baobab tree. Now, students, the baobab tree has a very, very distinctive root and trunk system. Look at the size of this trunk. It is actually adapted to the blistering heat and the very dry and perhaps drought-stricken environment. As you can see, there are in fact no leaves on this particular tree at this point in time, primarily because it is dry season. Look at the brush in the back. It is said to be relatively brown, and that is because the trees will eventually lose some of their leaves in the heart of the dry season. But the moment you have a lot of rainfall, perhaps in the wet season, they will actually pick up once again. Now, these trunks are very much adapted to be fire resistant, just in case they are in fact natural or perhaps man-made fires. On top of that, they actually store nutrients and even moisture. All right. Students, apart from that, the root systems and the trunk and whatnot, they also have very deep taproot system. Look carefully at this particular taproot system which exists below. It basically goes very deep into the ground in an attempt to acquire moisture and also nutrients, right? Primarily because of the fact that the area is said to be relatively hot, right? And what happened is that that is a very distinctive adaptation also for stability purposes and also for the purpose of acquiring moisture and nutrients to ensure that the tree itself does not die. All right. Another type of tree species you will actually find in the tropical savanna grasslands is in fact the acacia tree. Now, class, look at the green foliage on the top of this particular tree, primarily because it received or perhaps it may have been receiving significant amount of moisture, not too much, but significant amounts to facilitate the greenery at this point in time. Look at the crown, how broad it is. All right. Look at the level of shade that is provided. Now, class, just to mention very briefly, these trees are very, very unique. As a matter of fact, in the heart of the dry season, especially in the Serengeti regions of Africa, these trees communicate. All right, these trees communicate by chemical processes. What happens is that some small brush, right, or some small trees like these, what happens is that they can actually be fed upon by passing herbivores. And what happens is that the existing tree will send certain chemical substances, which can be wind driven and blown towards other trees. And what happens is that that will stimulate the other trees to produce a high level of tannins in their leaves. And that will actually literally kill some animals. So even plants are very, very unique in terms of the adaptation and whatnot. All right. Also, students, the leaves of all the trees in the tropical savanna grasslands, the leaves have an adaptation. It will possess a very unique adaptation as well, which is in fact that they possess a kind of waxy surface. This waxy surface reduces the amount of evapotranspiration losses, which also helps the trees to maintain some level of moisture, primarily when it is blistering or very hot in the outside, given the high temperatures primarily within the heart of the dry season as well. All right. Observe the leaves as well. They are not as large as those in the tropical savanna grasslands. They are relatively smaller, and the smaller leaves primarily allow. It's primarily because they receive a much less sunlight and energy. Okay, I didn't mean to say much less sunlight, but I meant much less energy in comparison to the equatorial region. Bear in mind, the closer you are to the equatorial region, the thicker the density of the savanna grasslands and even the trees would in fact be. However, if you are further away from the equatorial region, you will realize the area will start to become much more, well, much drier and essentially will possess a lot less energy when it comes to the receipt. Okay. All right. So that being said, jumping back into this particular diagram, these trees, they don't grow as tall as those trees in the equatorial region. Although in the area is said to be relatively warm, but the moisture receipt is in fact significantly less. They average at an estimated height of approximately 20 meters. 20 multiplied by 3.3 is just over 60 feet high, which is still relatively tall. All right. But there are, in fact, no distinctive layers per se. It is essentially said to be like a monotonous layer. All right. Quite unlike that of a tropical rainforest. Okay, so we just want to summarize very quickly some areas. These grasses are much more profound with very few or scattered trees. Some of the type of trees you will find existing here is in fact the acacia as well as the baobab tree. And the majority of the grasslands, the grasses are said to be growing in tussocks or huge clumps. And these huge clumps will actually have carpeting root systems as well as relatively deep root systems, which help to protect the soil and whatnot. In addition to which, these trees will have relatively thick barks, especially referring to the baobab tree, which is said to be fire resistant as well as drought resistant, given the fact that it stores nutrients and moisture as well. Don't forget the very huge crowns applicable to some of these trees. All right. In addition to which, moisture is in fact attempted to be maintained or perhaps conserved by the branching root systems on the surface. Temperatures are also very high, so this type of vegetation is in fact adapted to this. Hence the reason why the waxy surfaces on the surface of the leaves help to reduce evapotranspiration rates. All right. Areas where you can actually find tropical savanna grasslands include the Serengeti regions of Africa. All right. I'm going to pull up this very quickly. All right, the Serengeti regions of Africa, talking about like areas such as Tanzania and whatnot. All right, this area is said to be the Serengeti region, which actually experiences tropical continental climate, and there are in fact tropical savanna grasslands existing there. All right, areas such as the northern fringes of Australia also experiences tropical savanna grasslands, and there are in fact evidence which support that tropical savanna grasslands also exist here as well. Okay. Tropical continental climate is experienced in this region. Not to mention also, not forgetting as a matter of fact to mention also Venezuela, right? A section of Venezuela also experiences savanna grasslands in this particular region as well, on the outskirts of the Amazon basin or the Amazon rainforest. All right, this little cleared section, lighter color, represents that particular area where savanna grasslands can actually exist. So I hope this will actually be beneficial to you all. Now, close, what I'm gonna do, use this video, all right, as a guide, and in terms of the actual notes, this will in fact be shared with you all in the next class. All right, if that is the case, we don't have it already. But the fact of the matter is that just in case there are in fact any questions, feel free to ask. Don't be afraid. All right. Please, I strongly advise you look at these videos as a guide, all right, for diagrammatic view and whatnot. But at the same time, take in consideration the fact that you need to read through your notes for me, please. All right, try to memorize and read through your notes properly. Try to remember your actual statistical pieces of evidence and also the detailed sections of your notes that you must memorize, or perhaps try to utilize them for the purpose of your understanding and also for linking different points or perhaps doing comparative study with another type of vegetation. All right. So I hope and pray these videos are in fact very uplifting and perhaps very interesting enough to allow you to see further with respect to the actual note itself. All right, students, feel free to ask if you have any questions and let me know. You'll keep great. Bye bye.